Looking around, I saw another sign. It was a kilometer post. A white, in places rusty, angular plaque was mounted on the concrete shaft. It showed the numbers 276, and on the other half, after the corner, 275. This was definitely not my way. The way to the base consists of only 15 kilometers. It's on reinforced concrete sleepers. And there are no posts. As I was looking at the sign and trying to make sense of this shit, I heard a familiar sound. It was the same crunching of my neck vertebrae. But now, it was so close behind me that it felt like it was my spine snapping. But it wasn't him. At the same moment, I broke into a cold sweat. Blood pounded in my temples, and I fumbled for the handle of the hammer in the pocket of my orange vest. Grabbing the tool and clutching it, preparing to strike, I turned around. A meter away from me stood Ono. I couldn't call it human, but it looked remotely like a woman. A hunched, pale body, with twisted limbs in tattered, dirty rags that looked like a dress. It swiveled its head slowly, wriggling its neck a great deal. A living person could not do that. Its face was horrible. The torn skin exposed the pierced skull, the scalp with sparse, gray, and long hair hanging from a couple of centimeters of skin. The mouth was ripped down to the cheek on one side, showing off brown, rotten, bestial fangs, and a psychopathic grin on the other. The eyes were devoid of eyelids and eyebrows. They were completely white and emitted a greenish light. On thin hands without two fingers, it held some kind of lump wrapped in an old newspaper. Out of it came arms and legs. It was a baby. It was a baby. Dark, stinking blood dripped from the newspaper. My muscles began to cramp from what I saw, and the plate from the diesel locomotive fell out of my armpit and clattered to the gravel. At the same second, the thing bent its neck down sharply, looking at the sign. When it saw it, it slowly raised its head and smiled nastily at me, letting out a wrenching wheeze. I knew I had to hit her, or she'd eat me. I swung, bringing my arm back and ready to put all my strength into the blow to crack her skull to mush. But someone did it for me. A hand with a hammer appeared behind the creature, and juicy fucking hit her temple. The impact went into the brain, making a squelching sound. But the bastard didn't give a shit. She just twitched, turned back, and ran off into the crops, making some kind of wailing noise. If I'd hit her, I'd be dead. Out of the fog, a man stepped toward me. It was an elderly man in an old-style railroad uniform from the 70s. On his head, he wore a blue cap with a shiny emblem of the USSR Ministry of Railways. He had a broad, stern face, with green eyes and a gorgeous white mustache. Dumbfounded a little, I continued to stand in an attacking posture. Grandfather exhaled, brushed his hammer in the snow, staining it black and brown, and glancing at me said, "Yes, put the gun down, don't strain it. And why are you frozen?" His words sounded like an incantation, and I immediately lowered my arm and stood up straight in front of him. "Father, where am I?" I said, swallowing saliva. "Are you blind? You looked at the column for a minute and you didn't remember the number?" he said kindly, but at the same time with a kind of reproach. Yes, I understood that on 276th, but on this track there is no such kilometer, and the track is not the same. "And I do not know where the locomotive," he said. "And what the fuck was that thing in front of me?" Grandpa interrupted me. "Why are you talking like a machine gun? Do you believe your eyes? It says 276th, so it is. Where but on the tracks could your car be? On the freeway. Follow the track and you'll find it. What do they teach you?" He grinned. "What the hell was that thing standing there? You hit it with a hammer. The less you know, the better you sleep. Don't worry about it. Come on, the driver's waiting," he said, and pointed behind me. "Okay, we'll figure it out later. Thanks, Dad. Take care of yourself," I said, and was about to pick up the sign, but the old man grabbed it first. "It's not good to steal. This is mine. And say hello to Andre. Tell him it's from Egerich," he said, frowning his eyebrows. I made a look like, "Okay, boss, as you wish," turned around and went in the right direction. After 20 seconds behind me, I heard "Don't turn around." It sounded like a kilometer away from me, even though I had walked about 100 meters. After walking about 2 kilometers, I noticed that the rails became shiny from takat and lay on iron concrete sleepers. Then I saw a huge square silhouette ahead. It was my diesel locomotive. The rumble of the diesel engine energized me, and I rushed to my goal. Running into the locomotive, I closed all the exterior doors, climbed into the cab, and sat down, and just fell asleep on my desk. The machinist woke me up in the morning. We passed the shift and went home. In the smoking room, the old workers were talking about Palich. It's hard for a man. He's been through so much, and they send him to this place on the anniversary of the crash. Having finished smoking, I caught up with a mechanic and asked him everything I could. He told me that earlier, in the early 60s, there was no way to the base, nor was there a way to the base itself. There was a line between the stations, and one of the drivers had a wife. Poor thing went blind and crazy at the age of 32. She took her baby and went on a track and threw herself in front of a train. That train was being driven by her husband. Ever since then, there's been a lot of shit going on at mile 276. The traffic light closes on red. Then radio communication starts to give out some noise, whispers, and children's crying. And in fog or rain, one often sees some kind of kikimora with burning eyes. The trains were beating there afterwards. The track was collapsing. Then they dismantled the track and laid another one to the base. The men don't like that place. "And all this has something to do with a certain Igorich?" I asked, lighting another cigarette. The mechanic looked as if I had found out something I shouldn't have known, lit a cigarette, and reluctantly told me that in 1977 this Igorich was a machinist. His assistant was Andrei Palich. For some unknown reason, half of the crutches on that kilometer were torn out of the sleepers. The train went under the track. The driver died, having sent his assistant to the diesel room while he held the train brake crane to the last and reported by radio. Since that time, Palich constantly sees Igorich on the side of the track of the 276th kilometer. They were on the Tieshka of the third series with the factory number 692. It turned out that Palich went not to his wife's brother, but to the cemetery, to his fallen colleague who had given him a chance at life. A week later, I applied for a transfer to the station in my town. It's smaller and pays less, but the main thing is that there's less chance of meeting that bastard again. I've been working there ever since. Palich is retired and living the good life, as quiet as possible after all this. Last week I got a telegram that they found inhumanely mutilated bodies of locomotive crew and an abandoned diesel locomotive. I'm never going back there.